Welcome to episode 338 of the Defensive Security Podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me today, as always, is Mr. Andrew Callett.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bell, sir. How are you?
I am awesome. How are you doing?
I am good. We're both in the Atlanta area, and current forecasts are saying we might get an ice storm this weekend, but it might not. Who knows? You know, the weather is variable. So I'm
somewhere between some rain and Armageddon.
Most days. So as most people in the Atlanta area, I have gone and emptied my local grocery store of all eggs, milk, and bread because apparently during Armageddon, or at least weather Armageddons, one must make French toast. That's what we do.
Basically the law.
In Georgia. Yes.
Yeah.
So otherwise I'm good. Thanks for asking.
Awesome. So just let us get into what we'll be covering today. So, first, there's a story about, which I think is a good reminder that you really should have somebody minding what you put in the cloud. Maybe. There's some interesting analysis about password dumps. Criminals are starting to go all in on AI. The democratization of advanced malware. This is a bit of a follow-up to a story last week, and then it maybe I don't know. It's the jury's out, but it might be time to retire NTLM. I don't know why I have NTML. That's terrible. NTLM V1. I know it's going to go on my performance review. I get it. It's already sunk. I can't.
I don't know how many more interns we can go through. We've pretty much hired and fired all of them who will work for us.
We've sacked the person who sacked the person who made the error. Moose.
So NTLM or NTML, whatever floats your boat.
Right. It might be time to retire it after what is it, like 40 years? It's been a while.
Yeah. When we get to the article, I learned something I didn't realize, which was NTLM was first shipped not with Windows, but by Microsoft with OS2.
OS2, that's right. I did not know that either.
Probably a lot of kids today have no idea what OS2 is, but it was the bomb for a minute there.
Yeah. Yeah. We computers were almost great, right?
It's that magic golden moment.
And here we are. All right. And then a quick reminder that we sincerely appreciate our Patreon sponsors. If you do want to sponsor the show, you can do so at patreon.com/defensivesec. It's pretty cheap and easy to support us. You will get access a week ahead of time to all of our new episodes. We do publish them on Patreon a week ahead. So you can be in the know way ahead of everybody else, which is so important these days.
But in all seriousness, we chose not to take sponsors so that nobody can control our editorial commentary. You get our honest, raw opinion of these things. And this helps us do that. Like putting on a show is, I know the production values may seem not Joe Rogan level, but nonetheless, hosting costs and such, it matters. It helps. It really does offset our little labor of love here. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And also that the thoughts and opinions are ours and not those of our employers, past, present, or future. Okay. So first up, someone should really mind the cloud. This story comes from Bleeping Computer, and the title here is Hackers Exploit Security Testing Apps to Breach Fortune 500 Firms. I have, in the 300 or so shows we've done, 338 shows we've done, I've read a lot of articles, and few of them make me as depressed about the state of things as this one did. So the story here is that a pen testing firm found almost 2,000 instances of a bunch of intentionally vulnerable web applications, like the DVWA Dame Vulnerable Web Application, and the OWASP Juice Shop, and Hackazon, and BWEP, and I think a couple of others that were like running and publicly accessible in the cloud accounts of large companies like Cloudflare and trying, which other ones were there? Let's see, Palo Alto, F5. You know, I'm sure if you were to ask them, they would say, "Oh, it was a testing ground. We were doing research."
Well, I mean, it, I did have this in my notes. They could very well have been, some of these could be honeypots. We don't know.
But they did fix them after they were notified.
Then the honeypot worked.
So,
Test failed successfully, if you ask me.
yeah.
Anyway,
So what? Yeah, this the challenge here, as they point out in the article, is, obviously it's bad to include or run an intentionally vulnerable web application whose purpose is basically to test either your skills or your tools against assessing web applications, and having those running in your production account. But what they found in at least some instances were that these applications had privileged IAM credentials associated with them, which would have allowed access to like S3 buckets and secrets managers and so on and so forth. So this isn't like a benign sort of thing. And they also point in this article that they've observed that it was actually, these vulnerable applications were actually being exploited. Now, in these instances, the way they determined that they were being exploited is they see evidence that they're running crypto miners. And through from my own personal experience, like that's one of the most common things that happens when you have this kind of a vulnerable system exposed. But I will also tell you that in many instances where I've investigated systems like this that have been compromised, it wasn't just compromised once; it was compromised like many times. Sometimes there's like a king of the hill competition between the threat actors. Sometimes, like the more advanced threat actors will just let the noisy, the noisy crypto miners kind of do their thing while they're trying to move laterally and use the crypto miners as a bit of a smokescreen, giving the incident responders some kind of false sense of comfort that they've identified the problem and it's kind of limited.
That's clever. Tricky little tricksters.
Well, they have, they have some incentive, right, to be tricky like that.
Though I was thinking about this too. Like when you spin up like a crypto miner, like it maxes out CPU load immediately. How many people just don't notice that? Which apparently a lot just don't notice it until, their next bill comes by. Maybe, I guess, depends on what limits they have set on all their various cloud assets and how they've got it configured. But man, it just seems like such an easy thing to monitor for.
Yeah, so a lot of this isn't expressly the case, right? But a lot of cloud instances, you're not paying per clock cycle consumed, right? You're paying for X number of virtual CPUs or perhaps physical CPUs if it's a dedicated host. And in those instances, like if you're the customer, you don't really care.
I guess that's true.
But the cloud provider does, right?
Sure.
Because we're, as a cloud provider, we're oversubscribing the host that you're running on. And so if you've got customers who are pegging the CPU, well, that kind of works against you. And, it sort of breaks the business model. The other problem I've seen, and now they didn't talk about this, but it would have been possible given the level of access some of these applications were provided through the IAM, is the ability to spin up additional systems. And so we actually saw quite a lot of this where a customer's account had been compromised through some application that they had, or they leaked credentials, or they used weak passwords or whatever, and the adversary had the ability to spin up additional systems. And so while if they're just compromising and running a crypto miner on on the one system or the few systems that they've already been paying for, they're probably not going to incur a bill. But like if you get a threat actor that comes in and spins up dozens or hundreds of other servers and starts mining off of that, you could be in for a very rude bill. And
Yeah.
I have seen that, and those are difficult customer discussions. And a lot of times I think the cloud providers are pretty willing to work with the customers that happen when that happens. But it's
And that bill might be delayed by weeks from the
mm-hmm.
incident. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not like you get an instant feedback loop there.
Right. That's exactly right, because it rarely happens on like a billing cycle boundary. So like you find it and you might get it shut down, but you're probably already into the next billing cycle. So you have to kind of go ask for forgiveness on at least two billing cycles usually. And it's
fun times.
Painful.
Yes.
Painful for everybody. And the lawyers get involved, and it's all angry letters.
We should just ban malware. Just outlaw it.
We
should. Just nothing but trouble.
We really should. We really should. So,
but go ahead. I had some thoughts.
Go ahead.
Please continue. So you and I have talked about over the years this concept of not necessarily this exact model, but other models like vulnerability management tools or assessment tools being used as a pivot point to attack deeper into environments. And so this is kind of similar to that, where even if these were set up as test beds or even potentially honeypots, the thing that's interesting to me is how often they get forgotten about and left out. And if you buy everything in this article, and keep in mind it's being written by a vendor who is selling a Blinky box to help with these sorts of problems, so they've got a bit of an incentive here to kind of pat themselves in the back and make this problem as big of a problem as it is. But let's just take them at face value. It is frightening to me how easily this stuff gets deployed and then forgotten about, and then is running in assumptively in production. The other thing that I had in my notes from this article that was really interesting was, quote, the researchers established shells on the machines and enumerated data in an effort to determine their owners. That's a little sketchy, right? That's probably potentially crossing a line there, maybe. But it does point out a problem that I see over and over again, which is knowing who owns a particular cloud asset is incredibly difficult if you're a random third party. Now, that's by design in many cases, but attribution of assets gets incredibly difficult in these cloud environments. And I see this all the time when you've got third-party scanners like Security Scorecard or similar. I'm not necessarily picking on them. They all have the same problem. You'll get an alert saying, hey, one of your assets has got this problem. Like, that's not my asset. That hasn't been my asset in God knows how long. I have no idea. Like, because the IP addresses are ephemeral and they float around and they, get assigned to all sorts of different customers, and it changes fairly commonly, like fairly regularly, unless you've specifically purchased static IP addresses. So I get their frustration of trying to understand who owns this asset, and they're trying to notify them of the problem and let them know, hey, you've got an issue here. But at the same time, I don't know that popping a shell on them is super kosher.
It's certainly a murky area for sure. Obviously, they feel comfortable enough with their position on this to write a post and do interviews about it. So we'll see. But this is. I think this kind of goes back to one of the central points that we talk about a lot, and that is, cloud has transformed IT. and in a lot of ways, it's for the better. I think it's transformed things in ways that are like, kind of transcend actually cloud. It's like it's created this notion of an abstract consumption layer, which we've actually even implemented like in your own data center. And I think that's all good. But one of the one of the downsides, I suppose some people would say, well, it's also an advantage, is that it's made it super frictionless to spin up new things that are accessible from the internet without a lot of oversight. And so companies have to take very overt and dare I say, like more painful than perhaps in a even in a traditional environment to actually pull back and apply some friction, because that's a little more difficult. But this is a good example of how that can go wrong. But this isn't the only way that it's gone wrong. Like I've seen, when I worked at a cloud provider, like one of the most common problems were people setting up WordPress sites and then abandoning them.
with vulnerable plugins.
Right. Now WordPress, in WordPress's defense, like they've gotten a ton better. They do lots of auto updates and whatnot. Like they've gotten a lot better, but there's still a lot of maintenance that has to go on. It still requires active management, and
Yep.
that doesn't always happen when you don't have an ongoing organizational commitment. And when my experience is that there's kind of a push and pull between maintaining an appropriate level of oversight and having some amount of friction in the ability to deploy things on the internet.
Yeah, I agree. But it doesn't seem to be the way the industry's heading. If anything, it's going to get easier and easier to just set up whatever you want. So,
Yeah, but
in my mind, it's more incumbent on a security team then to somehow know about those assets, proactively scan those assets, find these things, and save ourselves from ourselves.
correct. Knowing what you have out there is very important. I guess the other thing I'll say is, done well, cloud does provide you in a window into your inventory that was really difficult to do in a more traditional IT environment. Because you have the ability to just to query your cloud account and get a list of inventories and IPs and whatnot that are existing inside that cloud account. But I think too few organizations actually take advantage of that. And there's a lot of tools, in fact, that will add abstraction on top of this and some levels of sophistication. I'm thinking like Wiz, and I know that AWS and Azure both have some native tools that will do it as well. So, but it requires somebody to care. And I think, in my experience, too many companies have this the cloud is a magical place notion, just like Tahiti.
And it's safe and it's magical.
Yep. All right. So moving on, we have analyzing password dumps.
My favorite.
This one comes from Security Week, and the title here is Analysis of 6 Billion Passwords Shows Stagnant User Behavior. Now, this will be super concerning. Like if when NIST changed its password guidance, that they basically concluded that when people don't have to change the password, they pick good passwords. So this is obviously wrong, right? This is all.
Wait, which one's wrong? The article or NIST?
The article is obviously wrong.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Because NIST could not be wrong. So anyway,
they're the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I mean, they are the National Institute of Standards and right.
Right.
They said
not
that
wrong.
They define what's right and wrong.
Correct. Anything else that contradicts it is by definition wrong. anyhow, so this report is based on an analysis of 6 billion credentials that were leaked or stolen throughout 2025. I didn't realize there were 6 billion stolen last year, but apparently a lot of these come from credential harvesters. So, like information stealers running on your workstation. And what they found were the most popular passwords, the most common passwords in 2025 were 1234556, 123456789, and 123456778, and admin and password, which, I've been doing this a long time, and I'm pretty sure that like you could go back to 1998 and it would probably be the same thing.
But Jerry, what about all the awareness training we've done?
Apparently, it doesn't actually help. Doesn't actually help. Now, they also did find an interesting split between what they infer are personal accounts, which tend to use passwords like 123456, and what they call, business or functional accounts, which are using passwords like admin and password. There is something, while this is all interesting, it occurs to me, follow me for a second. It occurs to me that there's a bit of selection bias on this, because my understanding is that most of these passwords were collected by info stealing malware running on the workstations or PCs of the people who were using these credentials. So like as they were logging into something, that piece of malware that was capturing those credentials and then storing them onto a C2 server. Eventually, some law enforcement agency or security researcher finds that C2 server. They get an order to take it down. They analyze the data, and then they write a report about it. And that's kind of where we're at right now. Is there conceivably a overlap between people who use crappy passwords and those that are more likely to have info stealing malware on their computers?
Well, that's a very, very good point. And likely, yes. And I think what we're lacking here is context, right? To be more helpful, we would need a sample of all passwords in the world.
Right. So now what we need to do as a control is like we need to go to security conscious people and we need to install info stealing malware on their computers so that we can actually run a side by side comparison.
For science, I agree.
For science,
brilliant. But in all honesty, you're right. There's probably like, hey, if your password got caught up in this, there's probably some other contributing factor, which probably is you don't patch or you're not security conscious or whatever. And I'm not trying to blame the victim here. I'm just saying that they're more likely to catch weak passwords because they're looking for weak systems. And these things have a certain level of correlation, I'm sure. And those Venn diagrams are probably pretty overlappy, which is a technical term I'm going to use.
Overlappy. Okay.
Yes. But I will say, in light of all that, there's two things here that occurs to me, which is that there's some segment of humans that are not going to change. They're not going to use strong, unique, static passwords, no matter what. They're just not. I don't know. I can't give you a good percentage of the world or your user base or whatever. But given that fact, I think allowing static passwords in your corporate environment basically is malpractice at this point. You've got to use MFA. It's just, I don't know how many other ways we can learn this lesson, that static passwords are going to bite you.
It's a very good point. They point out here that the researchers who wrote this report, and in fairness, it's a company called Spec Ops that is the author of the report. They are reminding everybody that a lot of companies have implemented phishing resistant or passwordless authentication, but the challenge is that few companies have it deployed everywhere, and so there's quite often pockets inside even the most robust and mature companies where they have some sort of legacy systems that don't have the ability to support the more sophisticated authentication schemes. So that's that is a big problem, and they're highlighting the importance that of not accepting that as the answer and finding a way to mitigate the problem. And there's ways to do that. Like you can put something in front of the application that requires this separate another layer of authentication, but like that's another bit of friction, and that's not cool these days. I guess.
Yeah, or you could also make sure that if you're aware that it has some sort of single factor only, and you don't allow it to touch too much sensitive data, or you limit its blast radius or something. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
awareness, I think, is the first step, and there's lots of mitigating controls you can build around it, depending on the environment and the willingness of the business. And I also think there's an aspect of purchasing. Some companies I worked for, we make it a criteria. Hey, you need to support some sort of MFA or SSO. We're not going to buy your tool. Oh, you mean I've got to buy the third tier up from what I wanted to buy just to support that? Well, you suck, but okay.
They've got your number. They know how to.
Yep.
They know how to get you to part with your money. There
Mm-hmm.
was one other interesting aspect to this that I thought was worth talking about, and that is how this kind of transcends cultures and languages. And so they point out that passwords like hello 123 are common, but so is hola 1234, which is the Spanish representations, basically the Spanish equivalent, and so on. So they point out that Pakistan 123 is common, as is Kumar at 123. So this is not a uniquely English problem or Western problem. I think it's a human problem that
Sure.
people just want to they want to get through that login and get on to doing whatever they need to do.
This just proves that the cultures that haven't developed a written language are more secure.
I, you're on to something. Not
I'll expect
Navajo,
my
right? Was the not right, we should be
saying.
migrating to Navajo.
I expect my call from the Nobel Smart Prize people any day.
I'm surprised they haven't already called. Honestly,
The problem is they call it like 3 in the morning and I'm sleeping, and I
so then they have to go to the next. Yeah, it's
just
it's
like
really
Publishers
unfortunate.
Clearinghouse.
Nobody's home. Let's go on to the next one. All right. Okay, so the next story is about how criminals are all in on AI now.
Just like my executives.
Just like every executive, yes. You got out just in time. I think I may be like the last non-AI CISO ever. So, anyway, the title here is For the Price of Netflix, Crooks Can Now Rent AI to Run Cybercrime. There's, this is hopefully not incredibly surprising, right? Like there's an immense amount of buzz and interest around AI, in the IT and security business spheres. Like there's so much excitement, so much buzz, some of it warranted, some of it not. I'm going to withhold judgment, right? But there's a reflection of all of that buzz happening in the criminal world, and so I don't think we should be necessarily surprised about that. This article is talking about how a company called Group IB, who does a lot of criminal activity research, has identified there's been a significant uptick in discussions about AI in criminal forums. They give some stats, and it's huge increases, and the implication there is that the criminals are figuring out how to weaponize AI. And one thing I think is important to add some context here. They don't really talk about it in the article, but I think I feel quite confident that this is the case. Like, the criminals are talking about how to leverage AI for the purposes of launching attacks. And we'll talk about that more in this article. But they're also talking about how to use the crappy implementations of AI by other organizations to launch attacks, right? So how can we jailbreak a chatbot to try to steal information out of it, and so on. So I don't think it's all about creating new tools. A lot of this is, I suspect, also about how to abuse the AI that other organizations have put in place. So I think that's an important bit of context. That said,
Yeah.
they point out that one of their observations is that there are now synthetic identity kits. This is, I thought, interesting. Synthetic identity kits that have AI generated faces and voices that can be bought for about $5. And these, by the way, allow you to run like a full deep fake. Like, you can become that person. You can get into a web meeting and you are that person. The person on the other end sees the identity, the synthetic identity that you bought, and it sounds like that person. It doesn't look and sound like you. And and we're here now. And so they talk about how they're seeing lots of fraud associated with this, particularly cloning excuse me, executives, and using that to launch what I would equate to like a modern business email compromise attack. Where it's no longer just an email from from your CFO. It's like your CFO is on WebEx or Teams or whatever, and he's telling you face to face that you need to go transfer some money.
Yep. Which absolutely screws with most of the way our brains are wired to understand what's real and what isn't. And
Absolutely.
it's incredibly powerful way to trick people. And it's cheap, right? We've talked about this for a long time. We knew it was coming, but I think that the big deal here is that it's cheap and it's commoditized and it's easy now. And you don't need a lot of sophistication to do it. I think it's just going to continue to get cheaper. And the idea of running private very modern but private LMs without any of the safeguards in place that the big public models put in place is something I don't think we talk about much. Everyone's like, oh, you can abuse ChatGPT to do this and Google Gemini to do that. Well, I can go get a huge model and run it on commodity hardware for cheap and not worry about any of those defenses or controls that those big systems have been beat up with, so they're adapting to. Like, I can just strip all that away and run my own, and it's nearly as effective. So
or it's, as they point out in here, there's actually models that are geared towards malicious activity, and you can subscribe to that. So kind of like you would subscribe to ChatGPT or Gemini, like you can subscribe to it. Obviously, you're probably going to be interfacing it with it through Tor, but like, you can get it as a subscription, or like you said, like I've downloaded DeepSeek and some of the other fairly large models from Hugging Face, and it might not be as good as like ChatGPT, but it's pretty good, and I don't have to worry about who's watching what I'm trying to make it do.
Yeah, but you did say like the whole identity cloning kits can be bought for like $5. I could finally have a friend for $5.
$5, that's right.
I've always wanted a friend.
We have a whole army of lurgs.
I just might. Next episode, there's going to be like 30 of me on the show.
It's going to be amazing.
Providing just as useless commentary.
Future is so bright. So bright.
But in all seriousness, I mean, we've said this over and over again, and this goes back to you've got to have proper processes in place to defend against this by, not just transferring money because the CEO said you should. Like, you've got to have business mechanisms in place that a third party, no matter how good their deepfake is, can't get around. That's the only way I see to combat this. I think there are lots of people out there saying, hey, we do deepfake detection. I honestly believe that the bad guys are going to keep outstepping those detection engines for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually are just going to get too good. So I'm not trying to take away. I've never tested them. I've never used those in the real world. So that's just a pure speculation on my part. But the state and the quickness that this is advancing, I really worry that defenses are just never going to keep up with this, and that your only real defense is a process and a methodology defense in your organization.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's definitely going to be an arms race, and I think at some point we're going to have to opt out of that arms race by like you said, building those somewhat intrinsically safe business processes that don't rely on on that level of trust. Because I mean, this no longer requires sophisticated or well resourced actors to pull off. Like, you can launch one of these things on the cheap now. It just requires somebody who has the willpower to do it and a stolen credit card and not much else.
Yeah. Interesting world we live in.
Yes, indeed. All right. So next up is the democratization of advanced malware. Ooh. So this one comes from Bleeping Computer. The title here is Void Link Cloud Malware Shows Clear Signs of Being AI Generated. So kind of following on to that last story, this is a bit of a follow-up to a story we talked about last week where, we mused about how odd it was that such a sophisticated appearing piece of malware had been developed and then used to deploy ransomware. And what has come out is this second report from Checkpoint, who also wrote the first report about it. After some further analysis, they believe that this entire, arguably quite sophisticated piece of malware was written by one person with the assistance of with an LLM. So that is somewhat alarming. Um, as Checkpoint says in this article, is quoted in this article, they believe this is the first instance of a known piece of AI, like actual AI generated malware out in the wild. We've talked about some research projects in the past, but like this is the first known instance of a AI generated or at least AI augmented malware that's out in the wild. So my concern is kind of like the tagline I gave it. It's no longer the domain of sophisticated actors. Like, we are
Yeah.
rapidly approaching the point of being able to vibe code advanced malware. Now, the person here knew what they were doing. Like, let's not mince words. Like, they knew what they were doing, right? They were quite organized. When I read this, like, this person had a pretty deep development background and went through some pretty significant hoops to organize the way that he was or she was using the LLM to produce the code. But what they're claiming here is that this fairly sophisticated piece of malware was created in a week. So
Yeah.
I think it kind of goes back to I'm equating this, by the way, to the pivot that we saw with ransomware. We've talked about this in the past, right? Ransomware was a very transformational thing in cybersecurity. The before times, you took a lot of risk because you could take risk because you weren't a known target, right? You didn't have intellectual property. You didn't process lots of money. You didn't like, there wasn't a lot of reason for a threat actor to care about you. In the after times, they don't really care. Like, it's just target of opportunity. If they can get $50 out of you, fine. Like, so be it. It's been industrialized. And so you really can't, reasonably at least, you really can't take the same kinds of risks that you did in the before times,
Yeah.
because you're going to get
Well,
zapped
yeah.
if you do.
You're much more
You
likely
can.
to. Sure.
You
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to be in the same position with this. Like, this, I suspect this is going to make it nigh impossible to operate, without things like EDR, XDR, and it's, and I don't mean void link, right? I mean the concept of relatively unsophisticated people en masse being able
Mm-hmm.
to create sophisticated uh, pieces of malware. So there you
We
go.
should just ban coding. I think that would solve the problem.
Yeah, well, we just ban AI. You know what? I take that
Hmm.
back. Let's ban
Hmm.
GPUs.
All right. All right. After I buy a new one, so I can play my games.
Fair enough.
I did have one thing in my notes. It was interesting in this one is quoting from the article. According to the analysis, the threat actor used spec-driven software development (SDD) to define the project's goals, set constraints, and had the AI generate a multi-team deployment plan covering architecture, sprints, and standards. Boy, that's just as soul crushing as working in a corporate software shop, if you ask me.
Except
I'm
it's
just
the AI.
bored reading that. I'm just bored reading that. Do you think they had like agile stand-ups every morning with the AI? Do you think they like had retrospectives and
Well, it was actually one that was one of the quotes that led me to believe that this person, whoever this is, they do work or have worked in a large development shop.
but
So
anyway, I just thought it was interesting. Now that's
yeah,
also I'm sure that's also an artifact of the tool they're using is built for that sort of model. So I'm just being silly about it. But the plan, according to the article, the plan was for 4 4-week sprints, but they had, like you said, they had it operational within a week and hit 88,000 lines of code very quickly. And apparently, Checkpoint, who did the research, was able to basically follow the same steps and generate very similarly functional code just with the AI. So they basically reproduced the work and validated that, yeah, you could just do most of this with AI, which is interesting thing.
right. So I again, I'm not particularly enamored with AI. Like, I don't, I'm not a fanboy. It's a tool, right? And this particular person figured out how to use this tool to create, a arguably pretty sophisticated piece of malware in a short period of time. The industry is moving at a pretty rapid pace, where it won't take the level of knowledge that this person had on how to orchestrate the AI to produce this code. It's not going to take that level of person for very long. Like, that's
Right.
where the industry is continuing to build abstraction layer upon abstraction layer, so that you can basically define a set of business requirements. Obviously, the business requirements here would be quite different than what you might see elsewhere, and then turn that into a functional application. I saw very recently, like within the past day or two, reports about how many vibe coded applications or mobile apps are on the Apple App Store, and it's hundreds. And these are the reason it's being called out is because they're pretty insecure. They're collecting personal information, and they're pretty insecure, which isn't surprising, because like the people who are writing them are probably not super sophisticated, and certainly not sophisticated enough to know how to advise the AI to do things well. And so that over time, I think, is the hole that's going to get plugged as
Yeah.
as these coding models continue to evolve. And when you have somebody who's like a bad person wanting to write malware, like they're gonna, they're gonna have a lot more tools, a lot more success. At the same time, like there's nothing magic about what is produced. Like it's still malware, still follows all the rules of physics that we're used to, but we're going to have to deal with a lot more, perhaps hard to detect and sophisticated malware than we've been used to in the past, particularly from less sophisticated adversaries. And I'm just worried about the volume of it, I guess, is where I'm going.
Yeah, you could get to a world where everything is very custom coded, not just polymorphic, but very custom, because there's low barrier to entry to just start fresh. So it'll be interesting to see how the defensive tools like the EDRs and XDRs of the world cope with that. And I'm not sure. Again, yet another arms race. It's always an arms race.
Yeah. Yep. All right. And then finally, we have it's time to let NTLM-V1 retire. So the title here from Ars Technica is Mandiant releases rainbow tables that cracks weak admin passwords in 12 hours. So this when this was announced, there was a little bit of a gasp in the room, but I think most people think that this is not necessarily a terrible thing. The issue, by the way, is that NTLM is what is it? It was released in the 80s with OS2, as you mentioned at the top of the show. It's like 40 years old. It was identified as having intractable weaknesses in 1999, 27 years ago.
Yeah, that's
In
ancient.
2012, in 2012 at DEF CON, some researchers released tools that allowed people to crack NTLM within a reasonable amount of time. So this isn't like a novel thing. What they're trying to accomplish with this is taking away the argument that there isn't like a pressing need to move off of it, because you're not reading in the paper every day that, oh my gosh, like ABC company was hacked because they're still using NTLM v1, even if it's buried in the somewhere down in the details. That's actually how they were able to perhaps move laterally. It was a component in an attack. It's not that doesn't make the headlines. And so there's
Right.
some comfort level, especially as they call out here, in perhaps maybe not mainstream IT stuff, so OT equipment and the medical equipment and whatnot that still uses it. And I think in some instances is because that equipment is just old. Like, it's just super old. In other instances, that they may be maybe newer equipment using older versions of Windows still.
Well,
What I didn't
yeah,
know is Microsoft hasn't sunset it yet.
right. Yeah, they still officially support it. Yeah. To the medical equipment thing, some of that is on the manufacturer, right? They said we certify it for this particular setup and this particular version, and it's like you're not allowed to change it. So, that's not always on the fault of the administrator of the system at all. The other thing I was going to say is I saw another version of this article that Mandate releases rainbow tables or hash tables to pressure security pros. I'm like, I promise you, the security pros are not the one who need pressure.
No.
They're on board with this. It's and what they say here is it's to pressure the business to make the investment to upgrade or remove or change or to prove, and this is something I always struggle with in my day job, which is, prove that I'm exploitable is not a great litmus test to do something, right? That's like saying, okay, my security team has to be as clever as every attacker that's ever going to come after us from now until this materially changes. And that's just fundamentally unreasonable. And I get, right? We're asking too much of teams. They can't patch everything. They can't change everything. You could invest infinite amount of time and energy into security work, and at some point there's a value diminishing returns. And how do you determine that? How do you make that cutoff and make that change? But to say prove that I'm exploitable is a tough way to go about it, and I don't recommend it. But that's part of what this is, to just show, that Mandiant comes right out and says that we want to make it easier for people to demonstrate how weak this hashing system is, and I get it. But I think anybody who's been in security a while, who cares about their job, knew this. I don't think this is any surprise to any of us in the industry. And some people are like, well, you're giving this up to bad guys. Look, the bad guys had this a long time ago. This is not that magical. So
yeah, this is not really arming the bad guys with something that they didn't already have. My view is this is something that security people can put on a PowerPoint presentation and walk around in their business to build support for making some change.
Yeah. And one key bit of context, by the way, 12 hours, like as a time frame, is leaving out on what type of equipment. And that's 12 hours on a $600 box. So pretty cheap hardware. I think that's, anytime we're talking about cracking or hash comparisons, it always depends on, as you said earlier, the power of the GPU or the CPU it's running against. And if I need a $500,000 supercomputer to do it, that's different than a $600 tabletop box. That's what they're talking about here.
The way they broke up the rainbow tables is actually pretty clever too. They have a series of hundreds of, in fact, I think it's 256 if I'm not mistaken, or maybe more, 2.1 gigabyte files, and you basically look. So you look at the hash that you want to break, and you look at the first couple of bytes, and then you go and you find the file for those first few bytes, and that way you don't have to spend as much time cracking. It was pretty ingenious way of organizing it, I thought.
That sounds like about 3 lines of Perl script. Could have done that for me.
Well, what do you want?
Busy.
It's free.
I'm
free.
Busy.
It's free. I don't think the intention is for people to actually use it. It's for PowerPoint slides.
Hey, get rid of NTLM v1 or NTML v1, whichever. Get rid of both of them. Get rid of
all of them. Absolutely. It's terrible. And rest in peace, OS2.
Hey, I hear OS2 Warp is still running out on some ATMs in the world, which is kind of crazy.
I'm somehow not surprised to hear that. So I'm alarmed to hear it, but I'm not surprised.
I should back that up with some research to make sure, but that's what I heard. So take it with a grain of salt, like everything on this show. Do your own research.
All right, that is the show for today. Thank you very much for riding along with us again. I sincerely appreciate your time and attention. Hopefully this is useful to you. If you want to find links to the stories we talked about, you can do so on our website. It's defensivesecurity.org. Look for episode 338. And also a reminder that we have the world's most awesome YouTube channel. Like I looked at a couple of other YouTube channels and they were not nearly as cool as ours.
I would agree. 100%.
So like I definitely recommend everybody go and subscribe there. It's at Defensive Podcasts on YouTube. One more quick reminder that we love our Patreon sponsors and we would love for you to be one too. It's patreon.com/defensivesec. And in the meantime, where can people get in touch with you if they would like to badger you and maybe not sell you anything, but Yeah.
I lurk around on X and your amazing Mastodon instance, infosec.exchange, with the handle of @lerg, LERG.
Awesome. And I'm mostly on infosec.exchange. It's @Jerry. I have been for a few reasons on LinkedIn more, and I hate it. It's an evil place. It's like the bad place. It really is the bad place. I really wish people would take
Aren't you
just a
inspired?
little bit of time to realize that I don't have a job, and so like I'm not gonna buy their super expensive thing, and like just move on.
Don't you feel
But
just
it's too
thought
much.
leadership oozing into your pores as you read these insightful posts from the movers and shakers of industry?
Well, there's a lot of consternation about the amount of electricity and water that AI is taking, and I have concluded that almost all of it is being used to generate posts on LinkedIn.
Well, and cat videos.
Fair, that's fair. But look, I mean, let's be honest. The cat videos are cute. The LinkedIn posts not so cute.
Fair. That's fair. Yeah, what I don't know if you noticed too. I know we're off on a tangent here, but the AI written replies are becoming very obvious.
I haven't seen as many of those.
Oh, yeah. Once you read a few, it's like, oh, this is clearly an AI written reply. It follows a very very similar format. It's like just the way it comes across. It's yeah, and there's this new methodology too of the first line of any post has got to be like within 5 words or less, and completely grabbing your attention.
The hook. It's got to be the
Yeah,
hook.
and then a lot of
Absolutely.
like very short line, punchy lines. It's like I look forward to when we get past this phase of AI. Anyway,
I
sorry, I
I
hijacked
think
your rant.
everybody's heard of the dead internet theory. I think it'll be a long time before that happens, but I think we are very close to the dead LinkedIn theory, where it's just AIs talking to other AIs. There's actually no people anymore. So anyway, I it's not my favorite place.
I get that.
With that, it is the end. You made it.
The end. We survived. If you're still listening, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. We will talk again next week. We love you all. Have a great week.
We love most of you. There's a few of you. You know
It's
what you did.
that one guy. There's that one guy that
Yeah.
we
He
don't
knows what
like.
he did.
Yeah.
The rest of
Yeah.
you, have a great week. Stay safe. Stay warm. Talk to you
Take
soon.
care. Bye.
Bye.